Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man, and Christmas time is here again, so we're back at the old Christmas cabin. Well, kind of. It's a holodeck simulation. Holodeck? Gonzalez, you're from Star Wars, not Star Trek. Hey, don't tell me what I can and can't do, nerd. Whatever. Anyway, it's this time of year where I think about my favorite Christmas tale of all time, A Christmas Carol. And like It's a Wonderful Life, it's a plot that's been referenced and parodied and called back to so many times you can't even begin to count. So to cap off our year, why don't we discuss a few of them? Like the Dracula XP's video, we won't be talking about the straight adaptations, because once again he needs content for next year too. Exactly. But because of this rule, we won't be talking about the Muppets Christmas Carol or the Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol, or the versions like the Rankin Bass animated version, the Chuck Jones animated version, or the Patrick Stewart version, or any of the live-action versions. And thankfully, the Robert Zemeckis Jim Carrey version will not be discussed. Thank God. No, what we're going to focus on is cartoon episodes or comic plots or the like that use the Dickens Classic as a sort of trope rather than straight adaptations. And one example of something that does that is the Flintstones Christmas Carol. Now, while this version sort of skates the lines of my self-imposed rule, I will note this. The Christmas Carol plot doesn't come into play until the end of the special's first act, as the plot itself is more about Fred Flintstone being cast as Scrooge in a community play. The play itself, while faithful to the story, is secondary to the main plot, which revolves around Fred letting his starring role get to his head and being an unironic Scrooge as a result. This causes him to alienate everyone close to him as he prioritized his starring role, and it takes his performance as Scrooge to realize how selfish he was being the whole time. As for the play itself, like I said, it's a fairly faithful adaptation, despite the Flintstones taking place in a time not only before Dickens, but before Christ. But if you can wrap your head around that, you'll find it treats the source material fairly respectfully, aside from a few bad caveman puns and names here or there. Though for a version of the tale that plays it a bit more fast and loose, we also have the Blackadder Christmas Carol. And unlike Fred Flintstone, Ebenezer Blackadder is anything but a selfish jerk. Which is kind of surprising, as the Blackadders tend to be snarky, conniving, villainous types, or at least trying to get out of the trenches in my favorite incarnation of the character from Blackadder Goes Forth. But in this particular take on the Dickens Classic, as I said, Ebenezer Blackadder is quite generous and loving. To a fault actually, as he's quite easily taken advantage of. But he still has the same snarky charm of its ancestry, and the fact that he is such a deliberate inversion leads to some really good jokes.
Mr. Bonnick. Oh, thank you very much.
However, when the spirit is done with Blackadder, he realizes how much he's been taken advantage of and how much more fun his more cantankerous counterparts seem to be compared to him. So he makes a change to be just as cruel and sadistic as his family legacy expects him to be, and I will leave it at that to avoid the best part. Moving away from the moving pictures for a minute, the plot was also done in a comic, Batman Noel. While the Dickens influence is merely pretense, a very unsubtle pretense of that, it still very much has the heart and soul of a Christmas Carol callback. On the night of Christmas Eve, not long after the seeming death of Jason Todd, the second Robin, Batman is throwing himself into his work and neglecting those still around him, and even his own health. He's visited by visions of the deceased Robin, as well as Catwoman, who was trying to provide him a distraction from his misery, but kind of failed at it, Superman, who tries to show him what Christmas is all about, and finally, a Cloaked Reaper-like figure who turns out to be the Joker, who buried him alive for the fun of it. The Christmas Carol nods are mostly loose, but the story does revolve around Batman's relationship with a poor man named Bob and his son Tim. A bit on the nose, but it's a really good comic nonetheless. The influence that the Charles Dickens Classic Christmas Carol had on pop culture, media, and even the season itself cannot be understated. In fact, I say this without a hint of exaggeration, that were it not for this particular story, there very well might not be a Christmas in today's day and age. During the time Christmas Carol was written, Christmas was in real danger of fading from public memory. The Victorian industrial age was filled with Scrooges who cared more about their bottom line than the brotherhood of man. Heck, England even banned Christmas more than once in its history, once briefly under Elizabeth I and once in 1647 under Lord General Cromwell. And things weren't better off in the rest of the Anglosphere, like in America, Massachusetts having its own Christmas ban from 1659 to 1681. Heck, not even the mostly Catholic French were safe, as the Jacobin government of the Revolution outlawed Christmas entirely until it was restored under Napoleon. Anyway, it takes this kick in the pants to get the holiday to be as big as it is today. Granted, if this story was never written, Catholic nations still would have made a big deal about Christmas, like in Spain, Italy, France, and Latin America, like they otherwise do for the Epiphany and Advent seasons as well, but regardless. But it's not like the world would have ended. We just would have strayed further away from God's light, and the world would be all the bleaker for it, but we wouldn't all be dead. That'd be silly. Like, imagine if Scrooge ended up bringing forth the end times with his miserly ways, and we'd all be killed if we didn't have Christmas. Sounds really silly, right? So, about the My Little Pony version. Alright, some context. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic takes place in a magical world inhabited by ponies and other talking animals like yaks, griffins, and dragons. As such, they don't really have the same kinds of holidays we do. We aren't even sure they have the same kind of calendar, as the topic never came up. As such, they don't really have Christmas, but they have a similar holiday called Heartswarming, which has all the same secular aesthetics as Christmas, but is closer to a 4th of July type of holiday, as it's the celebration of the founding of the nation of Equestria. That being said, the holiday sort of requires everyone to be cheery and warm to one another, lest these apocalyptic winter spirits, known as Wendigos, freeze the entire planet over. Yeah, it's that kind of series. And while there is truly nothing wrong with this part of Friendship is Magic, we jump ahead to the later seasons after the introduction of Starlight Glimmer to the main cast. For a quick backstory, she's a reformed ex-socialist cult leader who's now learning how to drop commies out of helicopters under Princess Twilight Sparkle. The heartwarming celebration is underway at Twilight's Castle of Friendship, but Starlight Glimmer is very about the whole thing. Probably because this episode debuted in fucking May. So Twilight tells her favorite story of the season, a heartwarming tale. Resisting the urge to make lewd cracks about getting some heartwarming tale from either of these two, instead of Ebenezer Scrooge, the story is about Snowfall Frost, and instead of being merely a miser, she outright wants to cast a spell that gets rid of the holiday, and is very capable of doing so, and almost does, prompting the three spirits to try to stop her. While I get what they were trying to go for, this fails as a Christmas Carol callback for a few reasons. Firstly, it misses the point of Scrooge. He wasn't a miser because of utilitarian reasons, though that was a byproduct. He was cold-hearted because of a hard life. Abandoned by a father who blames him for the death of his mother, and left at a boarding school all year, he never truly had a Christmas as a child. Then, later in life, as he grew more afraid of the world, he closed himself off from all those who loved him, costing him the love of his life. How the My Little Pony version does it is that the character, Snowfall Frost, portrayed by Starlight Glimmer, throws heartwarming away because she was scolded by her transparently Snape-like teacher once about it. It dumbs down the entire downfall of Scrooge as a man into how he was at present. Second, the lack of a Tiny Tim analog sort of depersonalizes the external stakes of Snowfall's current trajectory. Not that there's no stakes for anyone besides her, we'll get to that later, but without showing the fragility of innocence in a close proximity to Scrooge, it sort of dehumanizes the whole transformation. And third, the future. It's just Luna singing about how if Snowfall Frost goes through with what she does, the entire world freezes over, which, no shit, that's the lore of the holiday. It's as if in A Christmas Carol, rather than seeing the reactions to the deaths of Scrooge juxtaposed to the Cratchit's mourning Tiny Tim, it turns out Scrooge somehow got London nuked. Long story short, it just doesn't work. Which is unfortunate, but out of all the heartwarming episodes, this one is by far the weakest, as well as one of the weakest Christmas Carol adaptations I've personally seen. At least the Jim Carrey version is a direct adaptation of the source material, even if it's a style over substance exploitative mess. Granted, the elevated stakes on their own aren't necessarily bad. In fact, All Dogs Go to Heaven did a version of this where Charlie and Itchy try to redeem Carface before he can destroy Christmas forever with the evil demonic Belladonna. different belladonna. This one's a dog. Anyway, how this version works, where the My Little Pony version didn't, is it stays a lot closer and truer to the story, and thus truer to the heart. Plus the fact it had an all-star cast like Ernest Borgnine, Dom DeLuise, Sheena Easton, and Steven Weber certainly helped too. A few honorable mentions before we begin wrapping up. Roseanne, which did an episode using the plot but focused on Halloween and pranks. VeggieTales, which did the plot for Easter. The various Ghostbuster callbacks, which have the team trap the ghosts of Christmas with varying results, and yes, there were more than one of these. The Sesame Street version, which flew under the radar as it released the same year as the phenomenal Christmas Eve on Sesame Street. Scrooged, starring Bill Murray, which is set in the modern day of the 1980s, and filled with the anti-nihilistic stuff you expect from a Bill Murray movie, where he plays a sarcastic cynic. The Nintendo version, a German comic which had Wario as Scrooge, and the Sonic the Hedgehog version where Eggman predictably learns nothing. Anyway, to wrap things up, as I said, the Christmas Carol story is so ingrained in the Christmas DNA that you can say without the Dickens Classic, which itself was a cautionary tale written in an age where people were losing touch with what made life worth living, there may not even be a Christmas today. So it's no wonder so many people make callbacks and adaptations of the story. In fact, the greatest Christmas movie ever made, It's a Wonderful Life, is itself sort of a callback to A Christmas Carol, just instead of the protagonist being a miser trying to reform, it's about a genuinely good man being shown how much his life really matters. And with that, I think we're ready to close out for the year. This has been the Koopa Man. Have a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year, and I will see you all in February after my long winter's nap. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more, and talk about your favorite Christmas Carol callbacks in the comments, and until next time, game on.